In just 7 minutes, my career was stolen in a closed-door meeting. But in one night, I dragged an entire empire to the bottom of the river like a heavy stone. When the clock struck 8:48 p.m., they thought they had won. By dawn, $2.7 billion had vanished from their grasp like sand slipping through fingers. They took my position, my years of sacrifice, and handed it to someone who'd never earned a single moment of it. They just didn't know I'd been documenting every lie, every inflated report, every hidden security breach. Tonight, their greed would become their noose. My name is Rachel Monroe, and for 12 years, I believed in the American dream. Not the sanitized version they sell you in college brochures, but the real one, where hard work, intelligence, and dedication could elevate you from a cramped studio apartment to a corner office overlooking the Potomac. At 34, I'd clawed my way up from junior analyst to senior project manager at Everidge Systems, one of the most influential defense contractors in Washington, D.C. The office smelled like burnt coffee and ambition. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., I'd push through the revolving doors of our K Street building, my heels clicking against marble that cost more per square foot than most people's annual salary. The lobby's chandelier, a grotesque thing of crystal and ego, cast rainbow fragments across security badges and tired faces. We all wore the same uniform, dark suits, darker circles under our eyes, and that peculiar D.C. smile that never quite reached the corners. Everidge wasn't just a company, it was an ecosystem of power plays and paper trails. We didn't manufacture weapons or build satellites. We were architects of possibility, crafting proposals that could redirect billions in federal spending with a few well-placed paragraphs. Every contract was a chess game played with taxpayer dollars, and I'd become a grandmaster. My desk on the 14th floor was strategically positioned, close enough to the executive suite to catch whispers, far enough to avoid constant scrutiny. The view stretched across the city's monuments, those marble promises of democracy that looked so clean from a distance. Up close, I knew better. This city ran on favors and leverage, on knowing which senator's daughter needed an internship and which bureaucrat's cocaine habit could be quietly overlooked. I'd learned to navigate these waters with surgical precision. Never trust anyone who schedules meetings at 4:30 p.m. on Fridays. They're hoping you'll be too eager to leave to read the fine print. Always keep personal items minimal. The photo of my deceased mother was the only humanity I allowed on my desk. Document everything, but keep the most important files where IT can't track them. The Pentagon contract I'd been developing for 18 months was my masterpiece. A $2.7 billion modernization project that would revolutionize military supply chain management. I'd spent countless nights refining algorithms, building relationships with key decision-makers, memorizing every specification until I could recite them like poetry. This wasn't just a project. It was my proof that meritocracy still had a pulse in America. But Washington has a way of teaching you that truth is negotiable and merit is just another word that powerful men use when it suits them. The real currency here isn't talent or dedication, it's blood. Not the kind spilled on foreign soil for democracy's sake, but the kind that runs through family trees and connects corner offices to private golf clubs. I should have seen it coming when Thomas Halstead, our CEO, started inviting his daughter Emily to strategy meetings. Fresh from her MBA at Wharton, paid for, no doubt, by bonuses earned from contracts I'd helped secure, she'd sit there taking notes in a moleskin notebook that probably cost more than my first week's groceries. She had that particular shine of the privileged, that way of tilting her head during presentations as if she understood the decades of relationship building behind every slide. The truth about the American dream isn't that it's dead. It's that it was always a members-only club. And the membership list was written in ink long before any of us were born. But I was about to learn that sometimes, just sometimes, the outsiders get to burn down the clubhouse. The notification came through Microsoft Teams at exactly 8:48 p.m. I remember because I was watching the digital clock on my laptop screen, waiting for 9:00 p.m. to justify leaving the office without seeming uncommitted. The message was from Thomas Halstead himself, marked with that insulting red exclamation point that meant urgent, effective immediately. Emily Halstead will be assuming the role of lead project manager for the Pentagon Modernization Initiative. Please ensure all relevant files are transferred to her by start of business tomorrow. Thank you for your contributions to the preliminary phase. Preliminary phase, 18 months of my life, reduced to a preparatory footnote. I sat in my empty apartment, the laptop screen casting blue shadows across blank walls I'd never bothered to decorate. The cursor blinked at me, waiting for a response I couldn't formulate. Outside, D.C. continued its eternal performance. Sirens, helicopters, the distant hum of power being negotiated in restaurants I'd never be invited to. My hands were steady as I reached for the wine glass. But inside, something fundamental was fracturing. Not breaking, that would come later, but splintering along lines I didn't know existed. The Malbec was warm. I'd forgotten to refrigerate it, too focused on perfecting tomorrow's presentation that would never happen. The apartment was a testament to sacrificed living. A leather couch I'd bought online without sitting in first. A kitchen where the oven had been used exactly twice. The bedroom where I'd spent more time working than sleeping, my bed becoming a second desk covered in classified documents and compliance reports. This wasn't a home, it was a charging station for a human battery. I read the message again, then again. Each word was chosen with legal precision, no admission of wrongdoing, no acknowledgement of what they were actually doing. Contributions to the preliminary phase, as if I'd been warming the seat for the real player all along. My phone buzzed. Marcus Hale. Saw the announcement, I'm sorry, Rachel. So it was already public. Somewhere in the building, they were probably toasting with champagne that cost more than most Americans' monthly rent. Emily would be gracious. Of course, she'd been taught that winners should always appear humble. That privilege looks best when it pretends not to exist. I pulled up Emily's corporate profile, Harvard undergrad, Wharton MBA, a carefully curated LinkedIn showing internships at companies that happened to be average clients. Her professional photo was perfect, confident but not aggressive, intelligent but not threatening. The algorithm of acceptable female ambition. The rage came in waves. First, the hot, immediate fury that made my vision blur and my fingers curl into fists. Then the cold, calculating anger that settled in my chest like winter. But beneath both was something else, a clarity I'd never experienced before. They'd made a mistake. In their arrogance, they'd forgotten that I'd built this project from nothing, that I knew every line of code, every vulnerability, every place where the polished surface gave way to rot. I opened my personal laptop, the one IT didn't monitor. My fingers moved across the keyboard with muscle memory, pulling up files they didn't know I had. The real financial models, not the sanitized versions we showed the Pentagon. The security assessments that had been buried because they showed unacceptable risks. The emails where Thomas explicitly instructed the team to massage the numbers. 8:56 p.m. The walls of my apartment seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. Somewhere in this city, Emily was probably updating her social media, adding defense project lead to her bio with a humble brag about being honored to serve her country. She had no idea that she'd just inherited a throne built on quicksand. I stood up, walked to the window. The city sparkled below. All those lights representing lives and ambitions and dreams being slowly strangled by people who'd never known what it was like to choose between rent and health insurance. They thought they'd won. They thought I'd slink away, defeated and silent. Another casualty of the way things worked. The clock on my laptop clicked to 9 p.m. 12 hours and 15 minutes until the markets opened, 13 hours until the first government officials would check their emails, 14 hours until the press would be hungry for their morning story. They'd taken everything from me at 8:48 p.m. By sunrise, I'd return the favor with interest. The real game became visible once I stopped looking at what they showed me and started examining what they hid. Everidge Systems wasn't just a defense contractor, it was a dynasty in the making, with Thomas Halstead positioning his family to control government technology contracts for the next generation. I pulled up the corporate structure documents, the ones buried deep in SEC filings that nobody reads past the executive summary. Shell companies layered like Russian dolls. Everidge Holdings, Halstead Technical Solutions, Potomac Innovation Partners, each one owned by the last, all leading back to a trust in Delaware where corporate transparency went to die. Emily wasn't just getting a job. She was being installed as heir apparent to an empire built on taxpayer dollars. The Pentagon contract was the crown jewel. $2.7 billion over 5 years, with automatic renewals if performance metrics were met. But here's what they didn't want anyone to see. Those metrics had been written by Everidge itself, submitted through a consulting firm that was actually Thomas's golf buddy's company. We were grading our own homework, and surprise, we always got an A+. I opened the financial reports from the last quarter, the real ones we kept on a separate server. Revenue projections inflated by 35%. Operational costs understated by hiding contractor fees in subsidiary budgets. The AI-powered threat detection system we'd promised, it was barely functional, held together with outsourced code from freelancers in Eastern Europe who'd been paid to sign NDAs thicker than phone books. But the real smoking gun was in the security assessment. 3 months ago, our systems had been penetrated by what our IT team suspected were Chinese hackers. They'd accessed the preliminary defense algorithms, the ones we were about to implement across military bases nationwide. Thomas had buried the report, classified it as a minor incident that didn't require disclosure. The Pentagon was about to install compromised software into the heart of America's defense infrastructure. I'd raised concerns in a meeting, carefully, professionally. Thomas had smiled that shark smile of his and said, "Rachel, sometimes leadership means knowing which battles not to fight." I'd thought he meant bureaucratic red tape. Now I understood, he meant battles against his own greed. Marcus Hale had been the first to really challenge them. Senior security analyst, MIT graduate, the kind of brain that saw patterns where others saw chaos. He'd written a 20-page memo detailing the vulnerabilities, hand-delivered it to Thomas. 2 weeks later, Marcus was fired for performance issues. His reputation destroyed, blacklisted from government work. Now debugging code for a credit union in Maryland. Senator Cole Rivers had been circling Everidge for years. The Democrat from Virginia had made government accountability his brand. But Thomas always stayed one step ahead. Campaign contributions to Rivers' opponents. Charitable donations to causes his wife supported. The careful dance of legal bribery that kept oversight at bay. But Rivers was ambitious, eyeing a presidential run. A scandal this big could make his career. Dana Brooks at the Washington Post had been sniffing around defense contracts for a decade. She'd won a Pulitzer for exposing contractor fraud in Iraq. But Everidge had always been too careful, too connected. She'd called me once, fishing for information. I'd given her nothing, still believing the system would reward loyalty. That naivety felt like another person's memory now. I studied the web of connections on my screen, drawn in digital string like a conspiracy theorist's fever dream. Except every line was documented, verified, real. Thomas had built something brilliant in its malevolence, a machine that converted public money into private wealth while wrapped in the flag of patriotism. The Pentagon liaison, General Morrison, had been Thomas's roommate at Yale. The Congressional Oversight Committee included 3 representatives whose districts had Everidge facilities employing thousands of voters. The federal auditor assigned to our contract had a daughter at Georgetown. Tuition mysteriously covered by an anonymous scholarship from the Halstead Foundation. But every kingdom built on lies has a foundation of truth somewhere. And I'd spent 18 months learning where each crack was hidden. They'd created a fortress of paperwork and politics. But I'd been inside the walls. I knew which documents had been falsified, which signatures had been forged, which promises would never be kept. The clock read 11:30 p.m. The city outside had shifted into its late-night rhythm. Fewer sirens, more shadows. Somewhere. Thomas was probably sleeping peacefully in his Georgetown mansion, confident that he'd managed another smooth transition of power. Emily might be awake, practicing her first speech as project lead, never suspecting she was about to captain a sinking ship. They controlled the board, but they'd forgotten I'd memorized all their moves. Time to show them what happened when they mistook silence for surrender. The preparation began with methodology. Every keystroke logged, every file accessed timestamped. I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was building an airtight case that would survive any legal scrutiny. They'd taught me well. Document everything, leave no ambiguity. Create a trail so clear that denial becomes impossible. First, the emails. I'd been smart enough to BCC my personal account on crucial communications, a practice that violated company policy, but it seemed like prudent insurance. Now it was ammunition. Thomas's message from 6 months ago explicitly instructing the team to adjust the security ratings. The CFO's directive to redistribute costs to make margins appear healthier. Emily's premature access to classified project files weeks before any official announcement. A federal crime if anyone cared to prosecute. I activated the VPN I'd installed months ago, routing my connection through 3 different countries. Paranoid? Perhaps. But I'd learned that in D.C., paranoia was just another word for prudent. The encrypted folder on my external drive contained 18 months of evidence, organized with the precision of a federal prosecution. Financial documents, security reports, recorded meetings where Thomas had unknowingly confessed to violations while his Bluetooth speaker connected to my phone's recording app. The security breach documentation was particularly damning. Screenshots of the intrusion detection system, logs showing unauthorized access to classified algorithms. The IT department's panicked Slack messages that had been deleted from company servers but lived on in my archives. I had the original report declaring it a critical national security risk before it was edited to minor incident resolved without impact. My fingers moved across the keyboard with surgical precision, compiling everything into packages. One for the press, sensational enough to guarantee headlines but fact-checked to withstand scrutiny. One for the Pentagon, technical, detailed, impossible to ignore. One for Senator Rivers, politically explosive, perfectly timed for his Armed Services Committee hearing next week. And one special package for the FBI's white-collar crime division, complete with evidence of wire fraud, conspiracy, and violation of federal defense contracting regulations. The financial analysis alone would end them. I rebuilt the real books from cached data and interdepartmental transfers they thought were invisible. The $2.7 billion contract would generate only $1.8 billion in actual value, the rest disappearing into inflated costs, phantom consulting fees, and subsidiaries that existed only as tax shelters. I created visualizations that would make their fraud comprehensible to anyone, from journalists to jurors. 2 a.m. My eyes burned from screen glare, but adrenaline had replaced the need for sleep. Each document I processed felt like loading another bullet. They'd given me access to everything, trusting that corporate loyalty and fear would keep me silent. They'd never imagined that the same skills they'd exploited could be turned against them. I pulled up the contract proposal, the one bearing my analysis but Emily's name as lead author. Page 47, Section 8.3. The cybersecurity provisions I'd flagged as insufficient. Page 82, Appendix C. The cost projections that assumed a 0% inflation rate over 5 years. A mathematical impossibility they'd counted on nobody noticing. Page 134. The milestone timeline that promised deployment speeds our own engineers had declared impossible. Each lie, each distortion, each carefully crafted deception annotated and explained in language a first-year journalism student could understand. I included the original drafts, showing how concerns had been systematically removed, how warnings had been transformed into endorsements, how Emily's name had been retroactively added to documents created before she'd even joined the company. The master file grew to 400 pages, evidence, analysis, and a roadmap showing exactly how Everidge had defrauded the government and endangered national security for profit. I created an executive summary, a one-page destruction of everything Thomas Halstead had built. Bullet points like precisely targeted missiles, systematic falsification of security assessments, undisclosed critical breach of defense systems by foreign actors, financial fraud exceeding $900 million, installation of compromised software in Pentagon systems, nepotism violating federal contractor regulations. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop what you're doing. We can make a deal. So they were watching. Good. Let them see the tsunami building. I created redundancies, copies uploaded to secure cloud servers. USB drives that would be mailed to journalists if I didn't check in every 12 hours. A dead man's switch that would release everything if something happened to me. I'd learned from the best corporate criminals in America. I knew how to protect myself. 3:30 a.m. The city was at its quietest, that brief moment when even ambition slept. But I was wide awake, fingers flying across keyboards, building the weapon that would destroy them at dawn. They'd taken my career in 7 minutes. I was about to take their empire in 7 hours. The plan crystallized with perfect clarity, simultaneous release to maximize impact, timed for when denial would be impossible and damage control futile. By sunrise, their house of cards wouldn't just fall, it would be incinerated. The bar was a deliberate insult to ambition. Cracked vinyl seats, fluorescent lights that flickered like dying hopes, the smell of disappointment mixed with cheap whiskey. Marcus had chosen it. A place in Anacostia where nobody from K Street would ever venture. He was already there when I arrived, hunched over a beer that had gone warm, looking like defeat had taken up permanent residence in his shoulders. "You look like hell," I said, sliding into the booth across from him. "You look like someone with a death wish." His eyes were sharp despite the exhaustion. "They're watching you, Rachel. That text wasn't a bluff." "I know." I placed a USB drive on the scarred table between us. "Which is why I need your help." Marcus laughed, bitter as burnt coffee. "My help? I'm debugging credit union software for 60K EOS a year. My security clearance is gone. My reputation is destroyed. What exactly can I offer except cautionary tale status? You can offer the one thing they never expected, resurrection." I leaned forward. "You still have the back door into Everidge's systems, don't you?" His silence was answer enough. Of course he did. Marcus was too smart to leave without insurance. "They destroyed you for telling the truth," I continued. "Help me. And by tomorrow morning, everyone will know you were right. Your memo about the security vulnerabilities, it's about to become Exhibit A in a federal investigation." He picked up the USB drive, turned it over in his fingers. "What's on this?" "Everything. But I need the last piece, the actual intrusion logs from the Chinese breach, the ones they deleted from the main servers. I know you kept copies." "Jesus, Rachel." He rubbed his face. "You're talking about ending up in the Potomac with weights around your ankles. I'm talking about justice, the kind we pretended to believe in when we started this career." My phone buzzed. Dana Brooks, 11 minutes away. I'd given her just enough to guarantee she'd come. A screenshot of the security breach report with key sections visible. Journalists could resist many things, but not the promise of a Pulitzer. Marcus was still staring at the drive. "Even if I help you, even if we get the logs, they have lawyers who eat federal prosecutors for breakfast. Not after Senator Rivers gets the package I've prepared." I pulled out my phone, showed him the email drafted to Rivers's personal account, scheduled for 5:45 a.m. "His hearing on defense contract oversight is next week. This will make his career, and he knows it. He's been waiting for something like this for years." The door chimed. Dana Brooks entered, scanning the room with predator eyes before spotting us. She moved like someone who'd learned to navigate dangerous territories, confident but careful, her recorder already in her hand. "Ms. Monroe." She sat without invitation. "That screenshot you sent, if it's real, it's explosive." "It's real, and it's just the beginning." I slid a folder across to her. 18 months of systematic fraud, security breaches, and cover-ups. On the record, with documentation. She opened the folder, her eyes widening as she processed what she was seeing. This is Watergate level. The Chinese actually penetrated the defense algorithms. 3 months ago, Thomas Halstead buried it to protect the contract. I met her gaze. "I want this in tomorrow's morning edition, online by 6 a.m. That's 4 hours from now. I need to verify." Everything is verified. Source documents, emails, financial records. I've done your job for you. Dana. All you need to do is write it. Marcus finally spoke. If we do this, there's no going back. They'll come after us with everything. They already took everything, I replied. My career, your reputation, the safety of our national defense. We're just returning the favor. Dana was photographing documents with her phone, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. I'll need corroboration, another source. Senator Rivers will confirm everything by 7 a.m., I said. His office will demand an immediate investigation. The FBI will have the full package by dawn. Marcus pulled out his laptop. His decision made. The intrusion logs are on a server in Romania. It'll take me an hour to retrieve them safely. His fingers were already dancing across the keyboard. They logged keystrokes. Rachel, the hackers have every password, every encryption key, every backdoor into the system we're about to install nationwide. Dana's face had gone pale. This isn't just fraud. This is treason adjacent. This is greed, I corrected. Thomas Halstead chose profit over patriotism. Emily chose nepotism over national security. Tomorrow, they faced the consequences. The bar's clock showed 4:15 a.m. Outside, DC was starting its earliest stirrings, delivery trucks, joggers, the machinery of democracy creaking to life. In 2 hours, we'd feed that machinery the truth it had been starved of. We're really doing this, Marcus said, not a question, but an affirmation. We're really doing this, I confirmed. Dana stood, folder clutched like a winning lottery ticket. If this goes wrong, we did the right thing anyway, I finished. She nodded and left. Marcus continued typing. I sat back and waited for sunrise, for the moment when David would finally land the stone between Goliath's eyes. The Georgetown servers hummed in a basement that officially didn't exist, behind doors that required biometric scanning and clearances that Marcus no longer had. But code doesn't care about politics. And the backdoor he'd built was elegant in its invisibility, a ghost in the machine that had been waiting for this moment. I'm in, Marcus whispered, his laptop screen reflecting off his glasses in the dim light of my apartment. We'd relocated after the bar, knowing that what came next required privacy and precision. The intrusion logs are... Jesus, Rachel, it's worse than we thought. I leaned over his shoulder, watching directories cascade across the screen, each timestamp a breadcrumb of catastrophe. Show me. Here, March 15th, 2:47 a.m. Initial penetration through a vulnerability in the authentication protocol. They were inside for 6 hours before anyone noticed. His fingers flew across the keyboard. They downloaded everything: source code, encryption keys, personnel files, deployment schedules. My phone rang. Emily Halstead. I let it ring twice before answering. Rachel, what are you doing? Her voice had lost its polish, raw panic bleeding through. Whatever you think you're accomplishing, I'm accomplishing what you never could. Emily, actual work. I put her on speaker so Marcus could hear. How does it feel, knowing you inherited a disaster? You don't understand the full picture. My father built something important. Your father built a house of cards on a foundation of fraud, and I checked the clock, 90 minutes. It all comes down. We can make you rich, Rachel. Richer than you've ever imagined. Just stop this now. Marcus mouthed, recording, and I nodded. Everything was being documented. Like you made me rich when you stole my project? When you destroyed Marcus's career for telling the truth? That's business, Rachel. That's how it works. Not anymore. I hung up. Marcus had pulled up the financial transfers. They're already moving money. Cayman accounts, Swiss banks. They know what's coming. Too late. Dana's story goes live in 40 minutes. Rivers has the Senate package. The FBI. My laptop chimed. The FBI just confirmed receipt. The apartment felt electric, like the air before lightning strikes. We worked in synchronized silence, Marcus extracting the final proof while I prepared the last devastating blow. A comparison between what Everidge promised and what they knew they couldn't deliver. The Pentagon was about to pay $2.7 billion for a system that was already compromised, already obsolete, already a national security disaster. 3 a.m., exactly. Time for the final piece. Do it, I told Marcus. He initiated the upload to WikiLeaks, to 3 major news outlets, to every cybersecurity watchdog group that mattered, the intrusion logs, with detailed analysis showing how Chinese intelligence had turned our defense network into their personal surveillance system. Each file tagged with irrefutable metadata, each breach documented with forensic precision. My phone exploded with calls. Thomas Halstead, General Morrison, numbers I didn't recognize but could guess. Lawyers, fixers, people who specialized in making problems disappear. I ignored them all. Marcus pulled up Everidge's internal communication system, still accessible through his ghost door. They're in full panic mode. Emergency board meeting called. ET trying to lock down servers. Let them scramble. I opened my final email, the one to every Everidge employee, scheduled for 5:55 a.m. Subject line, the truth about your company. Attached, everything they deserved to know about where their work had gone, what their leadership had done, how their innovations had been perverted for profit. Rachel. Marcus's voice was strange. Look at this. On his screen, a real-time feed of Everidge's server activity. Someone was trying to delete everything, financial records, emails, project files, a desperate attempt to destroy evidence. They're wiping it all, he said. Let them. We have copies of everything. Every deletion is just more proof of consciousness of guilt. 4:30 a.m. Dawn was still an hour away, but I could feel it approaching like an avalanche gathering speed. Marcus had extracted everything we needed, the digital equivalent of a nuclear weapon aimed at Everidge's heart. There's something else, he said, pulling up a new window. The malware the Chinese installed, it's still active. They're watching everything happen in real time. Then they're about to watch an American company destroy itself through greed. I stood, stretched muscles that had been coiled for hours. Make sure that information gets to the Pentagon. They need to know how compromised their systems really are. 5 a.m. The first hint of gray touched the horizon. Somewhere across the city, printing presses were running, servers were updating, the machinery of accountability grinding to life. In 45 minutes, Thomas Halstead would wake to find his empire in flames. Emily would discover that inherited privilege couldn't protect her from inherited crimes. We did it, Marcus said, disbelief coloring his voice. We actually did it. No, I corrected, watching the clock tick toward destiny. We're about to do it. The countdown to sunrise had begun. The night's work was complete. All that remained was to watch the dominoes fall. 6 a.m., the Washington Post's homepage refreshed, and there it was. Massive security breach at major defense contractor covered up for months. Dana's byline underneath like a signature on a death warrant. The subtitle twisted the knife. Everidge Systems knowingly bid compromised technology for $2.7 billion Pentagon contract. I refreshed my phone. The story was everywhere, picked up by Reuters, CNN, the New York Times. The digital wildfire I'd lit was consuming everything in its path. My laptop showed the Everidge stock price in real time. Markets wouldn't open for another 3.5 hours, but futures were already in free fall. Pre-market trading showed a 47% drop. 6:15 a.m., Marcus pulled up Twitter. Everidge scandal was trending. Screenshots of Dana's article mixed with memes about corporate greed. Someone had already made a Hitler downfall parody with Thomas Halstead's face superimposed. The internet's cruel efficiency at work. 6:30 a.m. Senator Rivers's press release hit the wire. Immediate investigation demanded into Everidge Systems contract fraud. He'd scheduled an emergency hearing for tomorrow. The political machinery was engaging, gears turning with inexorable momentum. Look at this, Marcus said, showing me his screen. Everidge's website was down, replaced with a maintenance message. They're trying to control the narrative, But it's too late. 6:45 a.m. My phone rang. General Morrison. Ms. Monroe, what have you done? His voice was arctic. I've done what you should have done, General. Protected national security instead of your Yale roommate. You have no idea of the complexities. I know you signed off on a contract for compromised technology. I know you ignored security warnings. I know your signature is on documents that will be evidence in your court-martial. He hung up. 7 a.m. The FBI's statement went live. Federal agents are currently executing search warrants at multiple locations related to Everidge systems. I imagine them walking through those glass doors I'd entered so many times, past that obscene chandelier, carrying boxes that would contain the physical evidence to match my digital destruction. 7:15 a.m. The employee email had been delivered. Marcus monitored the internal network as chaos erupted. Mass logout attempts. People trying to preserve documents. IT frantically attempting to maintain some semblance of control. Several senior executives' keycards had already been deactivated, the board making sacrifices to the gods of public relations. 7:30 a.m. The Pentagon's announcement was terse, military in its efficiency. Contract 7782B with Everidge Systems suspended pending investigation. All associated technology deployments halted immediately. $2.7 billion. Evaporated with a paragraph? Marcus laughed. Actually laughed. Their entire C-suite is trying to flee the country. Look. He showed me flight bookings. Private jets suddenly chartered to non-extradition countries. Too bad the FBI will be waiting at the airports. 7:45 a.m. Emily called again. This time, I answered. You've destroyed everything, she sobbed. My father's having a heart attack. The FBI is here. How could you take what you never earned? How could your father sell out national security for profit? How could any of you think this would end differently? I'll testify that you stole classified documents. You'll go to prison. I'll testify that you accessed classified files before having clearance. We'll be cellmates. 8 a.m. The markets opened. Everidge stock didn't just fall, it cratered. Trading halted after 5 minutes when it dropped 71%. Billions in market value, gone. Retirement funds, institutional investors, everyone who'd bet on Everidge's corruption continuing forever, all wiped out. 8:15 a.m. Dana Brooks appeared on CNN, calm and professional, explaining the enormity of what had been uncovered. She held up printed documents, evidence I'd provided, each page another nail in Everidge's coffin. The chyron below her read, Biggest defense contractor, scandal since Lockheed Martin bribes. 8:30 a.m. Thomas Halstead's resignation letter hit the wire services. One paragraph, no admission of guilt. Just empty words about pursuing other opportunities and spending time with family. As if federal prison counted as family time. 8:45 a.m. The first congressional subpoena was issued. Then the second, then a flood. Every executive, every board member, every government official who'd touched this contract would be testifying under oath. Marcus closed his laptop. Exhausted, but exhilarated. Market cap down $4.2 billion, contract suspended, company effectively destroyed, in under 3 hours. I stood at my window, watching the sunrise paint D.C. in shades of gold and shadow. The city looked different now, not cleaner, but more honest. The monument still stood, the promises of democracy still carved in marble. But today, just today, they meant something. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. This isn't over. I typed back. You're right. It's just beginning. Because I had names, dates, evidence of a dozen other contractors doing the same thing. Everidge was just the first domino. The sunrise was complete now. Brilliant and merciless, exposing everything that darkness had hidden. They'd taken my career at 8:48 p.m. By 8:48 a.m., I'd taken their empire. The clock on my laptop read 8:48 a.m. exactly. Poetic justice had excellent timing. The apartment felt different now, not emptier, but clearer. Like a battlefield after the smoke clears. I packed my laptop, the external drives, the evidence that had changed everything. Not because I was running, but because I was done here. This place had never been home. It had been a war room, and the war was over. Marcus had left an hour ago. A job offer already in hand from a cybersecurity firm that suddenly valued whistleblowers. His reputation hadn't just been restored, it had been transformed into something more valuable, integrity proven under fire. I walked to the kitchen, poured the last of the Malbec down the sink. The woman who'd needed wine to process betrayal was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that justice wasn't a concept taught in law schools or promised in constitutions. Justice was what you took when the system failed to deliver it. My phone had been silent for 30 minutes now. The initial storm had passed, leaving wreckage in its wake. Everidge's headquarters would be swarming with federal agents, boxes of evidence being cataloged, hard drives being imaged. Thomas Halstead would be meeting with lawyers who charged more per hour than most Americans made in a month, trying to build a defense from the ashes of his hubris. Emily? She'd learn what it meant to inherit more than privilege. Every document with her retroactively added signature would be scrutinized. Every meeting she'd attended before having clearance would be investigated. The golden path her father had paved would lead straight to a federal courthouse. I didn't feel vindicated. That was too small a word for what coursed through my veins. This wasn't happiness either. It was something more profound. I'd been shown the true face of American corporate power, had seen how it operated in shadows and assumptions, how it crushed those who threatened its comfortable corruptions. And I'd beaten it. Not because I was noble or pure, but because I was meticulous, patient, and unforgiving. The moving boxes were already packed. I'd known this day would come, one way or another. San Francisco had a startup that needed someone who understood government contracts but wasn't tainted by the D.C. swamp. They'd called yesterday, before any of this broke, interested in my expertise. Now they'd be getting someone who'd proven she could navigate treacherous waters and come out dry on the other side. I took one last look around the apartment. The bare walls, the functional furniture, the workspace that had been my life for 2 years. None of it mattered. Things never did. Actions mattered. Consequences mattered. Truth, when you could force it into the light, mattered. The taxi was waiting outside. The driver, an Ethiopian immigrant who'd been ferrying D.C.'s power players for 15 years, recognized something in my face. "Big day?" he asked. "The biggest," I replied. As we drove past the Everidge building, I saw the news vans, the federal agents, the small crowd of employees standing outside, some crying, some on their phones desperately networking for their next positions. They were collateral damage, but they'd chosen to work for a corrupt system. We all make choices. Today, they were living with theirs. The city blurred past the window. The Capitol dome, the monuments, the buildings where democracy was supposedly practiced. It all looked like a stage set now. Elaborate props for a play about justice while the real decisions were made in boardrooms and country clubs. But not today. Today, the script had been flipped. I thought about power. Real power. It wasn't sitting in a corner office or having your name on a government contract. It wasn't money or connections or inherited privilege. Real power was information, carefully gathered, precisely deployed. Real power was patience, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Real power was the ability to destroy those who thought themselves untouchable. My phone buzzed. A message from Dana. "Pulitzer Committee will be calling. Thank you." I deleted it. I didn't need thanks. I didn't need recognition. What I needed, I'd already taken, proof that one person, properly motivated, sufficiently prepared, could bring down giants. The taxi pulled up to Union Station. The Acela to New York would leave in 40 minutes. Then a flight to San Francisco. Then a new beginning. But I wouldn't forget this city. These people. This moment. They taught me something valuable. In America, everything is for sale. Including justice. But sometimes, just sometimes, someone refuses to sell. I walked through the station, anonymous among the travelers, invisible in my victory. Rachel Monroe, who'd brought down a $2.7 billion defense contract with a laptop and the truth. They'd never see me coming next time either, because there would be a next time. There always was. Another corrupt company, another stolen opportunity, another Emily Halstead believing the world owed her everything. And when that moment came, I'd be ready. The train pulled away from the platform, DTC shrinking behind me. Somewhere in that city, Thomas Halstead was learning what it felt like to lose everything in a single morning. Emily was discovering that Daddy couldn't fix this. The Pentagon was scrambling to understand how compromised their systems truly were. And I sat in my seat, heading west, carrying nothing but clothes and the knowledge that I'd won. Not the American dream. That mythology was for people who still believed the system worked. I'd won something better. The American reality. Where power taken was sweeter than power given. Where revenge served cold at dawn tasted better than any champagne at any celebration they'd never have invited me to anyway. Justice hadn't been served. I'd served it myself. And it was perfectly seasoned with their tears. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and justice served cold. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of taking down corporate corruption resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Rachel's position? Let me know in the comments.